too. My name is Helen Stoner, said our visitor. I live with my stepfather, who is the last survivor of the oldest families in England, the Roylott family of Stokey Moran. Perhaps you have heard of my stepfather's family? Holmes nodded. I am familiar with that name. The family was once one of the richest in England, but several recent Roylotts were lazy, wasteful men who gambled away most of the fortune and land. All that's left is a few acres of ground and a 200-year-old mansion. My stepfather couldn't count on the estate for his livelihood, so he borrowed money and went to medical school. Then he moved to India and did very well there. He had always had an awful temper, however, and in a fit of rage he beat one of his servants to death. It was a terrible scandal. He served a long prison sentence. Afterward, he returned to England a bitter man. While still in India, Dr. Roylott met and married my mother, the young widow of Major General Stoner. My twin sister, Julia, and I were 2 years old then. Our mother had quite a fortune, at least £1,000 a year. Her will left all her money in Dr. Roylott's control. The only exception was that a certain amount was to go to my sister and me when we married. 8 years ago, shortly after we moved to England, Mother was killed in a railway accident. Dr. Roylott moved us to his family's estate at Stokey Moran. The money Mother had left him was enough for us all to live there comfortably. But instead of making friends in the town, our stepfather shut himself in the house. Whenever he came out, he got into fierce quarrels with everyone he met. People fled when they saw him coming. The only people he will allow near him now is a band of wandering gypsies, which camps on the estate's grounds. He spends most of his time with the wild animals he had sent here from India. He lets the cheetah and a baboon roam free, which further terrifies the townsfolk. My sister and I had no friends. After all, who would want to visit us? Few servants there to work there either. So we usually did the housework ourselves. Julia was just 30 when she died, but already her hair was turning gray, just as mine is. Your sister is dead? Asked Holmes. Yes, said Miss Stoner. She died 2 years ago. I'm here, Mr. Holmes, because I'm afraid that the same thing is about to happen to me. Go on, said Holmes. The only pleasure Julia and I had was when we were allowed to visit Miss Honoria Westphal, our mother's sister. On our visit 2 Christmases ago, Julia met a young Marine, and they became engaged. Our stepfather said nothing against the marriage, but just 2 weeks before the wedding, a dreadful event took my dear sister's life. Holmes had been leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed. He half opened them now to glance at Miss Stoner. Give me every detail, he said. We live in one wing of the old house. The other has been shut up, since we don't need the rooms. The sitting rooms are in the center of the building, and the bedrooms are in our wing, all on the ground floor. The first bedroom is Dr. Roylott's. The second was Julia's. The third is mine, all in a row. There are no doors between them, but all open into the same hallway. All 3 rooms have windows facing the lawn. You understand? Perfectly, Holmes replied. On that fatal night, Dr. Roylott went to his room early, but we knew that he hadn't gone to bed, since my sister could smell the strong Indian tobacco he smokes in his pipe. It bothered her, so she came to my room for a while to talk about her wedding plans. As she left at 11 o'clock, she paused at the door. Tell me, Helen, she said, have you ever heard anyone whistle in the dead of the night? Never, I said. Why? The last few nights, I've heard a low whistle about 3 in the morning. It wakes me up. I can't tell where it comes from. I haven't heard it, I said, but it must be the gypsies out in the lawn. I suppose so, she said. Well, it's not important. Good night. She smiled at me, shut my door, and a few moments later, I heard her key turn in the lock. Key? Said Holmes. Did you and your sister usually lock yourselves in? Always. We never felt safe from the cheetah and baboon unless we locked our doors at night." "Quite so. Please continue." "I couldn't sleep. The wind was howling, rain was slashing at the windows, and I couldn't shake a feeling of doom. Suddenly, I heard a terrified woman scream. It was my sister's voice. I rushed into the hallway. Just then, I heard a low whistle. Moments later, I heard a clanging sound, just of falling metal. When I reached Julia's door, the key turned in the lock and the door swung open. My sister appeared in the doorway, her face white with terror, her body swaying. I threw my arms around her, but she fell to the ground, writhing as if in terrible pain. As I bent over her, she shrieked and said, "Oh my God, Helen, it was the band, the speckled band." She pointed toward the doctor's room. I ran for his door, calling out for help, and met him in the hallway, rushing toward us. By the time she reached Julia's side, she was unconscious. He tried to revive her, but she died. "Are you sure about this whistle and metallic sound?" asked Holmes. "Yes," said Miss Stoner, "I'm sure." "Was your sister dressed?" "No, she was in her nightgown. In her right hand was a burned-out match, and in her left hand she held a matchbox." "So, she had struck a light and looked about her," said Holmes. "That's very important. Did the police investigate?" "Yes, thoroughly, especially since Dr. Roylett is well-known as a violent man. But they never found a clear cause of death. Julia's door had been locked from the inside, and her windows were blocked by shutters with iron bars that are locked shut every night. The chimney is barred, too. The walls are solid all around, so is the floor. My sister was alone with terror struck, and there were no bruises or marks of violence on her." "What about poison?" asked Holmes. "The doctors examined her for it, but found no evidence of it." "What do you think she died of?" "Pure fear and nervous shock," said Miss Stoner, "but I have no idea of what frightened her." "What do you suppose she meant by the speckled band?" "Sometimes I think she was just babbling with terror. Other times I think she meant a band of people, such as the gypsies. Some gypsies wear dotted bandanas on their heads." Holmes shook his head, looking dissatisfied. "That was 2 years ago. Why come to me now?" "A month ago, a dear friend of many years, Mr. Percy Armitage, asked me to marry him. My stepfather had no objections, and we are to be married this spring. 2 days ago, repairmen began working on the west wing of the house, starting at my end. I've had to move from my room to Julia's. Last night, I lay in her bed, thinking about what had happened to her. Imagine my terror when I heard, in the deep of night, a low whistle. I sprang up and lit the lamp, but saw nothing. I got dressed, and as soon as it was daylight, slipped out of the house and ran to town, where I hired a carriage to take me to the train. I came straight here." "That was wise," said Holmes. "We haven't a moment to lose. If we went to Stokey Moran today, could we examine the rooms without your stepfather knowing?" "Yes, he has business in town today," said Miss Stoner. "He won't be back until evening." "Excellent. Expect us early in the afternoon. Will you be all right till then?" "Oh, yes. Talking to you has lightened my heart. I look forward to seeing you again this afternoon." She dropped her veil back over her face and left us.